Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about women's rights. This will be the beginning of the section on women. So, take a moment now to look up the definitions for the three vocabulary words on your sheet. You can pause now. So, the status of women in the 1800s. Women could not own property. When a woman marries, all the money and property she inherited becomes her husband's property. Women's wages from work were the property of her husband as well. Women could not vote or hold political office. Women had few legal rights, and women had absolutely no control over pregnancy. So, women had very little control over anything they could do at this point. Women were expected to care for the home. In the United States, laundry day was every Monday, and that involved women waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and doing laundry until nighttime. In the house, women were in charge of the dairy, the buttery, the larder, and the pantry. These are probably new words for you. So, a dairy is where women made cheese, butter, yogurt, and other dairy products. In the buttery, the woman made weekly rations of beer because at this time, water was too dangerous to drink, so they needed the alcohol to kill the bacteria. In the larder, women dried and or cured meat to make it last for months. Fresh meat was very rarely eaten at this time, so they made sausages, ham, dried meat, and other such things. And then there's the pantry where women preserved fruits and vegetables, such as pickles or jams or other preserves, as well as where they kept the grains. And then finally, women raised the children, and children were expected to be seen and not heard. The man is the master of the house, and because of this, women were often disciplined like children. And in this household, the man's decision is final. So we had the Seneca Falls Convention. We kind of already looked at this with our first reading. So women were upset that they did not have the same rights as men. So a convention in Seneca Falls, New York saw 300 people in attendance, including 40 men. The Seneca Falls Convention took place on July 19th and 20th, 1848. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote the Declaration of Sentiments. She wrote that we hold these truths to be self evident that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, if you are thinking you might have heard these words before, that's because you have. So, we hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal is from the Declaration of Independence. But what Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote, she added women to this. So the Declaration of Sentiments is like a play on the Declaration of Independence. At the end of the convention, 68 women and 32 men signed the Declaration of Sentiments. Now we have Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony is a big figure in the fight for the right to vote. She was arrested for trying to vote in the 1872 presidential election. She was violating the Enforcement Act of 1870. Anthony was found guilty and was made to pay a fine of $100, which today would be about $2,300. She also worked towards what's called the temperance movement, which is the banning of alcohol. And she did this because women were often the victims of their drunk husbands. Susan was also the president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. And she worked hard to get a constitutional amendment for the right to vote. But unfortunately, she died in 1906 before the 19th Amendment passed in 1920. So she was never able to actually see that right to vote. Next, we have Alice Paul. She worked with the National Women's Party to get the 19th Amendment passed. She led pickets of the White House protesting Woodrow Wilson's inaction on women's suffrage. After World War I broke out, there was a debate on if women should continue to picket. In 1917, the women decided to do a campaign of civil disobedience known as the Silent Sentinels. Over 2,000 women took part in this protest, and Alice Paul was in charge of the planning. But you'll see that the picketing begins to escalate. Starting in June 1917, women started to be arrested for obstructing traffic. The women were largely nonviolent, but were attacked, and the police would just arrest the women. The police would even arrest the men who helped the women who were being beaten. Alice Paul decided she must get arrested in solidarity with the other women. While in prison, Alice started a hunger strike, and she was forcibly fed raw eggs through a tube that was shoved down her throat. In 1917, on November 14th, there was the Night of Terror, where 40 prison guards were ordered to beat the women with chains and iron rods and smash their heads, and even caused a woman to have a heart attack and die. Well, the women didn't just let this happen. They made sure the news found out about this. And the press coverage of the women's hunger strikes and the Night of Terror began to change people's views on women's suffrage. Congress voted on the 19th Amendment 5 times between January 1918 and June 1919. On May 21st, 1919, the House passed the 19th Amendment with a vote of 304 to 89. On June 4th, 1919, the Senate passed the 19th Amendment 56 to 25. Then became the long road for ratification, which means they needed to get a supermajority of states to pass the law giving women the right to vote. So between June 10th, 1919 and August 18th, 1920, the necessary 36 states ratified the amendment. And on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment is certified, as pictured here, and officially added to the Constitution. So now what? With the passage of the 19th Amendment, many women were allowed to vote, but many women were left behind. Black women dealt with Jim Crow laws that prevented them from voting, and we'll learn more about this later. Asian women were not given citizenship until the 60s, which we learned about in Unit 1. Native American women were barred from voting, and we'll learn more about this later in this unit. Latin American women faced poll taxes and threats of violence just like black women. And women still could not open bank accounts in their name. So, even though there was a win for equality, the fight for equality still had a long way to go. That is all for today. I will see you next lesson.